Hello and welcome to the Otakus After Dark, the podcast by adult weebs for adult weebs. Grab your drink of choice and sit back and relax as we talk about sub versus dub and manga elitism on today's podcast. I'm Dom Hoozle. I'm joined here with Exile Sentinel, aka Danielle.
Hello, everyone.
And the ever wonderful Emily.
Hey.
So, sub versus dub. Very controversial topic for us today. And definitely the Manga Elitism.
Maybe we should start. What is a sub and what is a dub?
Do you have?
And I can let us know that.
Yeah. Do you have a definition for that? I certainly.
Yeah, I do actually. I came prepared.
Well, okay. Excuse me. Please tell us.
So, subbing refers to the subtitles that are placed at the bottom of a show so the audience can read along as the action occurs in the background. So, subtitles make the connection.
Makes sense.
Dubbing refers to the process of removing the original Japanese vocal track and replacing it with one's native language. So for us, English, but it can happen if you're in France, the Philippines, Spain, Mexico, whatever your native language is, you can have your own dubbing department. So that way you do not have to sit and read subtitles.
Very cool. So, I guess to start us off, do you guys have a preference of one or the other? Or are you more of a mix of both? Because I know I'm very much a mix of whatever sounds better for me. So sometimes I pick the sub, sometimes I pick the dub.
Honestly, I'm the same.
Yeah, I'm definitely the same. I would say that I have a preference leaning slightly toward dub just because if it's available in dub, typically I'll choose that. But there are lots of animes that I've enjoyed in sub, and I really have no problem either way.
I definitely had a point in my otaku career seasonedness where I was like strictly sub, that I had that mindset like I had to enjoy it in its true form. But I mean, I first got into it off of dubbed anime, and now I don't really care because sometimes I need to be doing work or I just want to clean the house or something and just have anime on in the background, and I can't, listen to a sub. I don't know Japanese, so I would have to keep watching the screen while I'm trying to do other work, which is not impossible, but pretty close.
Yeah. So, I guess just to like jump right into it, since we're all kind of a mix of both, we don't really have a preference. I feel like we're very like unbiased, I'd like to say.
Mm-hmm.
But this is like, for some weird reason, this is a very like contentious issue in the community. I can't really speak for other dubs. Like, obviously English isn't the only dub.
Mm-hmm.
But
it's the one we have most experience with.
Yeah, particularly when it comes to English versus Japanese, this seems to be like a huge problem that causes like a big divide. Mostly on the sub side, I would say. Like, do you think that's fair to say? Like, the sub people are usually the ones that have the biggest issue?
Yeah, I mean, so
Probably the most vocal.
I've like I had a time where I was mainly dub, and then I had a time that I was mainly sub. And now, I've kind of gotten into the mix. But like being on the dub side, it's like everybody's kind of like, oh, you only watch dub anime? I listen to the superior Japanese dub. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that I think the biggest thing would be that dub, the VA community for that, the voice actors and voice actresses of English dubs are a lot smaller than because there's just not that big of a market compared to Japan. And then I think another thing is like a lot of these Japanese voice actors and actresses, they get really into the role, and I think they tend to be more show more emotion when they are doing lines, because they understand the material better, because they're getting the script firsthand, and they're not getting like a loose translation of it that helps fit the like the lip flaps and stuff like that. Um, but also they just have more experience, because some of these people have been around for ages. Not to say that, every VA in the English dub hasn't been around long enough, but I feel like there's still more experience in the Japanese side, and I think that just comes with time.
Japan benefits from having more opportunities for voice actors to get like more education towards it and more training. Whereas like here, yeah, you can go to school to become an actor, whether it be on stage or film, and you can do like voice work. Like I took a dialects class in college because I'm a theater major, but there's not too many places that you could just go anywhere and be like, I want to take a class on voiceover work, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a really interesting point, because it's something I've heard many times before, that they have more experience and they show more emotion and things like that. And my main critique of that argument, I'm not saying it's not true, but my main critique is that there are so many, outside of anime, obviously, there are so many like cartoons and shows and movies that have been dubbed in English. And nobody complains about it. Nobody has a problem. And some of the people working in these movies are not trained voice actors by any means, but nobody has any comments to make about it. It seems very specific to the anime community, and I'm not sure that I 100% believe that argument when people make it. I think it's a convenient argument, but I don't necessarily think that that's why, like, why people that are like sub elitists, essentially, why they're watching in sub and why they choose to watch in sub is because of the experience. Because from my perspective, first of all, one of my biggest pet peeves in this community, it genuinely infuriates me, is this idea that like watching sub will make you truly cultured or like intelligent, just because you're watching the show in Japanese. And I actually think that's the main motivation behind why people watch sub, because for dub watchers, they're just like chilling, they're just watching the show, minding their own business. They don't really say anything about who chooses to watch anime and what language. But sub elitists always have to make it known that they only watch sub. They like make that very clear. So for me, I don't feel like they're watching it because they believe that the actors are more experienced or that they're genuinely better. I think it comes from a place that it makes them feel validated as like a purist, like they're the pure weeb on some level. And I think that that's kind of, in my opinion, the motivation primarily for watching in dub. Because the reality is, from my perspective, is that if you're a native English speaker, because obviously I can only speak from like a Western perspective, who doesn't know Japanese, like your assessment of whether the sub is actually good, even if it is, like even if it truly is by Japanese standards, your assessment of it isn't 100% valid, because as an English speaker, of course, you can criticize the dub, you can point out its flaws, but with a sub, like you can't do that. You may think that your ear is trained enough to hear the problems with it, but at the end of the day, like you're not familiar enough with the language.
Yeah.
So like
That's definitely
you can't,
a note I took too. That
yeah.
like you like even though it's in original Japanese, like we don't know how like what's a like the way they speak, their sentence structures, if it's like perfect delivery or not. Like it could sound cool to us, but I don't know what he's saying there. Like you can say Nani and I'll know that's what. But anything else, I don't know if that's like delivered well. He could be saying it in like broken Japanese and like stuttering the whole time, and I won't know.
Well,
Exactly. And you don't know how much experience that voice actor has. Like the other day we had all just discussed Otakoi, the anime, and we were all kind of shocked to find that like the voice actors for the Japanese, that like they had no experience.
yeah,
Really. It was their first role,
their
and
first
it's
big
not
role.
something you think about. Yeah, well, yeah. So it's like, it probably sucks to hear this for a lot of sub-elitist type people, but it's the truth. Like, you you don't know Japanese. I'm talking about the people that don't know Japanese in particular. Like, obviously, if you know it, then that's a whole other story. But you just don't know the intonations of the language, and so you can't fully say that it's better. It's an assumption at the end of the day. You're assuming it's better, but you actually have no idea whether it actually is.
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting argument because also um, the lines in anime in Japanese are very over dramatized, and it's stuff that people normally wouldn't say in everyday life. Um, I know lines like "shinderu" or whatever the hell it is. Stuff like that. People don't say that. It's like then there's the um, there's one famous character who says desu on the end of their sentences, and that's meant to be like a cutesy way of talking, but it's like saying the neon at the end of the sentence as well. It's just it people don't say that. Desu would actually be des, and people that are like, oh well, I know Japanese because I read these subtitles and I can easily translate it. And it's like, well, first off, you're reading a translation that's about a rough translation still of what the
Exactly.
Japanese is. They don't have to worry as much because they don't have to fit it to the lip flaps. But these translations are very rough and not completely accurate to the sentence structure, just because it's so different from English. And then these lines are dramatized because they are entertainment. So of course they're going to be dramatized. It's like any kind of show that you watch online. It's like CSI, and like Brooklyn 991 or whatever it's called. Um, those aren't like accurate to like what a CSI agent actually goes through, or what a firefighter or whatever would go through and stuff like that. They're over dramatized for the entertainment. Um,
Yeah. And here's the thing, like I'm totally fine with people watching sub. Like I'm not trying to say that like dub is superior or anything by any means, but I just feel like there are so many arguments made against dub that are just unfounded and kind of unfair from a Western audience's standpoint. Um, and like I totally respect it. If you want to watch dub because you're genuinely trying to learn Japanese, or you're using it to help you in that regard, or even if you just
Sub.
genuinely like it better, the sub, yeah. Um, if you genuinely just like it better, that's totally fine. Like, I have no problem with that. But when you start making arguments that like people that watch it in English are like disgusting, horrible weebs, and they're not true, like they're not purists. That really, it's just so stupid to me, because it's like, I hate to tell you this, but you are also a native English speaker. Like you're not Japanese, you know? It's it, it really actually reminds me of like when weeaboo was like, people would actually call people weeaboos as like, an insult. Like
Slander.
that's really what, yeah, that's literally what it reminds me of. Like these people are actually like weeaboos. They want so badly to be Japanese, or to feel validated by watching the sub, and it kind of irritates me because it makes no sense.
so from my past of being like very engrossed in the anime community, I know that in previous, like when anime was less like accessible, a lot of anime that were English dubbed were very much censored, and I think in the past, it was less about the English sub being, better voice acted. Rather, it was just better scripted, and the lines and the translations were so much better in the subs because, like, you had like the 4Kids dubs and stuff like that were censoring it, and Cartoon Network was censoring it as well and stuff like that, because they knew like younger kids would be watching it, and parents didn't want as much of the violence, so these shows were toned down a ton when they came over to the West.
Brought that up too because I had a specific example of that for the pro sub side because Sailor Moon suffered from that growing up, like that being like one of the first shows I watched growing up in English. There's two characters in Sailor Moon, Sailor Uranus and Sailor Neptune. They were portrayed as cousins in the English dub, whereas they're actually lovers in Japanese. So at the original dub, they obviously censored that whole love story between the two and shipped them into being cousins. But with the new bring back of Sailor Moon and the Sailor Moon Crystal and all that, they actually have corrected it in the redub, which is nice, but it's definitely like when I was a kid, they were cousins, not lovers.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it was like weird to come back to, and it's like, oh, that was a lie.
Yeah.
You
And
lied to me.
I think that's another thing too, is that it's I think obviously dubs, like especially the older ones, I will admit, like some of them are really just they suffer from bad voice acting, maybe bad translations, also like all sorts of things that are just make them kind of bad, and I get that, but I think people are still keeping that in mind, like, and hating on dubs that are actually very well done in English, just because of like the English voices in the past. Like, I think people are kind of thinking a little too much about that, and they're not actually thinking about like it's improved a lot, since that time.
Well, it's funny because certain anime, they were meant to be dubbed. So like Panty and Stocking is a very enjoyable anime for me. It's a very like adult comedy. And it's got a lot of different like animation techniques in it and stuff like that. But the humor and pacing and the lines themselves were meant to be more of heard in English rather than Japanese. And they work so much better in English. Now, am I going to completely say that it was meant to be English and that's the only one that's valid and all that? No, like the Japanese is just as well. It's good. It's not my favorite. So I'm not gonna say it's just as good because I personally don't enjoy it as much, but I have no problem with it. But it just shows like dubs can be better. They can be more like interesting and more iconic than the subs can be. But so I think also with like the emotion and stuff like that, that kind of argument on emotion, I think a big thing is not only is the script changed to fit what they can do in the English dub, but also like the English dub actors and actresses can't get access to the original mangaka as easy and stuff like that, so they don't know what their motivation as much would be. They just kind of have to go off this script that the writers made and just accept that that's their motivation. So you can have whole characters that completely change between the sub and the dub just because of that.
That is true. I will say that if I had to pick a side, then I guess I would be pro dub, just for the sheer fact that dub makes it like anime accessible to anyone. Because who's to say, like, there's people that, can't just sit there and read sub, like
That
physically.
is
Um,
actually such a good point. Oh my gosh. Danielle.
it's true though, because like I can read it, it's fine, but like who's to say someone else doesn't have that hard time of like keeping up with it? Um, or they want to like, enjoy the art direction in the background, or
Or
they're
even
someone who just hears better than seeing.
or maybe they yeah, like maybe they literally have like impaired vision. Like maybe they're blind or something. I mean, yeah, I
Too,
that's
it is
actually
the
such a
most accessible for someone to get into and enjoy.
that is yeah, that is such a good point that I didn't actually even think of because again, like it's not just English dub, like it can be dubbed into any language. So it's like when you think about it in that way, it's like yeah, it can reach such a wider audience. I'm glad you brought that up. I didn't actually think about that till now. But
Yeah, that was a
it's a
big
good
point
point.
because, it's a community that we all want to enjoy and be involved in. But obviously if you have something that like either physically or mentally holds you back, you don't want that to like impede your good time. You want to still enjoy it as like your friends. And I
And you
think having those outlets to be able to enjoy the same things and be able to come together and talk to each other is so good. So, so good.
So I guess if I had
exactly.
the
And you don't want to be ashamed for it either, right? Like if you literally can't read the
Yeah.
subtitles, if there's
Mhm.
something like I think that's so horrible that there are people on the sub side shaming people for dub. Like you actually don't know if there's a particular reason why they're watching it in dub. So yeah,
well,
that's
so
another
that's
good
an
point.
interesting because like so for shows like Kimi ni Todoroki, um, me and my girlfriend have been watching it in the English sub because can't watch it in English dub. There is no English dub as far as I know, unless there's like some kind of hidden English dub somewhere. But
I don't think so.
Stand
so
up.
we've kind of been having to watch it in English sub, which is fine. My girlfriend has been enjoying it a lot, um, to the point where I picked up the manga because after we're done the anime, I'm sure both of us want to, figure out what happens next. But
Right.
her biggest point was it when she has to read the subtitles, it kind of takes her out of the scene, and she can't keep up with them at some points. Um, which is something I was like, oh yeah, that was me early on. Like it's something you pick up over time, watching the English sub. But
Yeah.
when everybody first starts out, you have to like pause it so many times. Even now, I'd have to pause at certain points that are just like walls of text, and it's just like, what the hell is this? And it's
Kimi
like,
ni Todoke is a shoujo. Like, there's not much action going on compared to something like Demon Slayer or like
yeah. So
JoJo.
there's more
There's so much going
dialogue
on in the
Right.
background for
to
those.
get to get into, and so um, that can definitely take you out of the scene for sure. But if I had to say, I would have to say I'm more pro sub. I don't watch a lot of anime anymore. So I'm not one to care either way. But if I had to take a stance, I'd say pro sub, only on the fact that because I'm not like following all of the English, or I'm not following all the Japanese voice actors and actresses like socials and stuff like that, and seeing what they're like. I can see the drama more on the English dub side, and I also see that because there's a cultural difference too, where like for Japanese, it's more of like speaking out and doing things that might be deemed as unprofessional, um, like attacking fans and stuff like that. They won't do those, and they'll simply, apologize to people or whatever, just because it's a more of a cultural thing for them. But from a business standpoint, that's such a smarter move. The English voice actors and actresses tend to be more, I would say, unprofessional in that respect. But that's only because I think I'm also more. I can see that more because I speak English, and
Yeah.
it's so much easier for me to, you know, find that rather than like if I see an English or I see a Japanese tweet, it's like, well, I gotta translate it and stuff like that. And at that point, it's like, you know, is the translation correct fully and stuff like that. But from what I can see, I mean, we had the like Vic Mignogna allegations. The Naruto VA flipped out and attacked fans on Twitter. Um, you know, I think an issue nowadays is more of the culture surrounding the community that's kind of dampered and made it more unprofessional rather than the VAs themselves. And
Well,
like this
that
whole
and do you
cancel
also
and woke culture.
I was gonna
Well,
say, do you also see that as like because we are Westerners compared to Japanese who, if from our like viewpoints of them, they're not really as outspoken and vocal
Yeah,
about
well,
things like that,
I
whereas
think
Westerners are quick to defend themselves or attack if something were to happen, you know?
yeah, I think so. I think we're very prideful over in the West, and I think we're very we see the this kind of free speech um and all of this like you have to defend yourself, um whereas like Japan sees that as unprofessional. It is unprofessional. You shouldn't bring your personal emotions into a work environment. a you know, you're gonna have critics no matter where. um it doesn't matter if you're a small time YouTuber to a professional voice actor and actress. You're gonna have those criticisms, and you just kind of have to take them with a grain of salt. You know, hear what they're saying, because I'm sure, you know, a lot of the criticisms is just stemmed from people that are they enjoy it. They enjoy the content. They just want they want it to be better, and I think that that's a valid, you know, criticism. I think that fans should um, keep these companies in line to produce the best quality content that they can, and I think that they've definitely been lacking in the that aspect. But it's like at the same time, uh, you know, companies like Funimation aren't really like full, like they're English dubbing. They're not fully building this anime from the ground up. So a lot of your criticisms can be stemmed back to the Japanese like companies. So I think it's a mix of like we can't fully understand um the what goes on in the Japanese side, but it as much as we can on the English side. But at the same time, the culture has made us more outspoken and unprofessional as a community.
Yeah,
okay, well,
I can kind of agree with that. Sorry, Emily, I just want to get it
no,
out
it's
before I
okay.
forget. But I do follow a number of like English voice actors that, you know, get those fans that are, you know, criticizing um because of like certain things that have happened in the role, which is fine. Obviously, everybody is entitled to their own opinion, but there are those fans too that I guess would be some of those pro sub elitists that will just end up criticizing the person just because of what they do and kind of attack them on a personal level, which is why I understand where the human aspect of wanting to like defend yourself
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
not take that
And
comes to play.
that comes with like our
So
upbringing and stuff like that. And I don't think you should just sit back and like take all of it. That at some point you're gonna crack. But I think, you know, learning, you know, what is okay to say and what is more of like you getting more emotional into it is the difference in those arguments. I'm sorry I interrupted you. as well, Emily.
That's okay. That's okay. I don't want to spend too much time on this. I agree with you and I don't. I think Danielle made a really good point in saying that I think there are a lot of people that criticize English voice actors for no reason. Like they genuinely are just criticizing them because they're an English voice actor, for one.
Yeah.
And then also I think that we get a lot more news of the lack of professionalism, I guess, because we are in the West. So you're obviously going to hear about the English voice actors.
Mm-hmm.
Like, obviously, Vic Mignogna, like, he's a good example of what happened. We won't get into that. But, like, you know, in Japan, they have a history also of, like, sweeping, you know, sexual assault allegations and stuff under the rug. And in the West, we don't really do that as much. So I think scandals are also a lot more apparent in the West because,
Well, I think we're also
you know,
more
we're more
interested
willing
into
to bring
that.
it to the forefront.
I think we're very much a drama community over in the West, and we like juicy topics like that. And so I think people were more likely to like crucify someone like Vic Mignogna, and they're like, "Yes, take him down." And like in the end, it came out that a lot of these people had. I'm not going to say everybody had a false allegation, but there wasn't sufficient evidence against him, and he ended up countersuing a lot of these companies that let him go, and voice actors and actresses that were like joining this woke movement without kind of educating themselves fully. And I think that's another issue.
So I don't want to get into that because I think that's messy territory, like talking about whether or not it's true or whatever. Like, that's not what my point was. It was more just so, like, you know, I think that when things like that come out, obviously people are a lot more like, let's band together and support the person making this accusation because it's very serious. And in Japan, it's more like, okay, you know, not always. I don't want to talk about Japan as if I'm like an expert on them, but from what I've seen, there's a lot of things where they don't dole out punishments.
Well, if you look at like the manga issues, like with the act age mangaka and stuff like that, that stuff he didn't really receive a punishment at all for his crimes, and it's kind of swept under the rug, and then they kind of like keep him on vacation for a week or two, and then they bring him back. While over here we're immediately like the complete opposite, and I don't think either side is good, but circling back to the sub and dub, I think we see that, you know, we definitely see that the dub a lot more, and I think that makes us more critical of it. When we attack these English dub actors so much that they're people at the end of the day. Like, you can't treat them as if they're just robots that just they voice your anime.
Speak into a mic.
Yeah, they're real people at the end of the day, you know. If they get mad, you know, you can't really, you know, criticize them for that. Everybody gets mad at some point. Everybody says stuff that they, you know, regret. So I don't know, it's just a silly argument to say one's superior to the other. I think every anime has a different quality to it, and it deals with what the work put in is, and how it came out, and the budgets. And in the end, you have some that are good, some that aren't. It's the same thing with like regular Hollywood movies. You're going to have big blockbusters that are terrible because they were rushed, or they were just trying to get it out. And you have others that are phenomenal.
Yeah, and I think that's a good note to end this portion of the topic on, is just, if you're somebody that maybe has like slightly sub-elitist tendencies, I think it's important to just take a step back and appreciate both sides
from the other side.
Yeah, well, it just take a step back, appreciate the fact that both the sub and the dub have work put into it, and they're people that are just trying to do their jobs, and that's really the end of it. So just respect what other people want to do and how they want to watch anime at the end of the day.
Well, you said the word again, so it's kind of our next topic we wanted to touch on is elitism in
As a
this
whole.
community. And there are a fair amount of sub-elitist, but there are a few other aspects of the community that people have this kind of elitism that can really put off new people, current people, can be pretty toxic.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know if you guys wanted to talk about what particular aspect would you like to talk about first? Because I think we have quite a few different things we'd like to go over, or a couple different, not quite a few, but a couple different things.
So I would say I want to talk about more on the manga elitism, since we've been talking about the anime elitism, kind of with the sub and dub. Let's go into the manga elitism a little bit more, in these gatekeepers that kind of that you should only read or do certain things, and then if you read say a certain genre such as like shoujo or whatever, you're not as cultured as we are,
Right. Okay, yeah, let's talk about that. So for manga elitism, and this is something that weirdly enough I was like very ignorant to until fairly recently, until I started getting into like Discord and like meeting you guys and like talking to a bunch of different people, is like the fact that there are a lot of anime watchers specifically that are very upset with like some of the manga community, because there are apparently people in the manga community that intentionally like to spoil anime watchers for no reason, just because they have that power to do so. And it's become a problem. Like I see a lot of people talking about it, and it's actually very upsetting, because it's so like, what a crappy thing to do to somebody. Like, we all know we hate spoilers, and it's unfortunate that seems to be a portion of the manga community that is intentionally, well, they can read ahead anyway because the manga comes out first usually, but they're reading ahead and then just spoiling character deaths and stuff for people.
Yeah, in like today's world, because back then sometimes the manga wasn't coming out as fast as episodes of anime were coming out, that anime had to go on a different track, so it didn't matter. But today, Emily and I were talking about it before the podcast actually, and it's like a big example is Attack on Titan fans. The manga has been out, people know what's happening, especially during this last like final season of the anime. And there are a few manga people on Twitter that I've seen that have just, blatantly put out there what's going to happen, who's dying.
Yes,
I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to be
of
that
course,
person,
yeah.
but they're with no spoiler warnings, no kind of tags to keep it away, that, if you're just scrolling your timeline and you see that, you're like, well, fuck. And,
Yes.
I'm someone who's like not too upset by getting things spoiled. Like I still enjoy what I watch, even if I know it's happening. But there are some people that if you spoil it for them, it's ruined. Like the surprise factor is gone.
I'm glad you brought that up. Actually, it's so interesting, specifically with the Attack on Titan situation. A friend of ours, Carrie, and I were both spoiled for Attack on Titan. And it's so funny because I had managed to avoid spoilers for years and years. Like I did not start and finish watching Attack on Titan until July of 2020. And, because I was preparing for the fourth season. And then as soon as the fourth season comes out, there are people that read the manga who think it's funny, that were spoiling it in a Discord that I was a part of. And they spoiled, a character death. And I was very upset. I was like, what the heck? Like, why would you do that? That's so, and they did it on purpose. They thought it was hilarious. And I saw people were very like, why would you do this? Like, we were waiting for this moment in the anime. And it's so ridiculous to me that there are people that, for whatever reason, like they go out of their way to spoil anime watchers. And I don't know where that comes from. I don't know why that seems to
Some
be
like
such a common thing.
sadistic tendencies, like to
Yes.
just like in causing other people pain.
Literally. But and the reason we're bringing this up, I guess, as a form of elitism is just because when you know that you have the power of knowledge because you read the manga and you choose to punish people that watch anime, I feel like that is a very elitist tendency and mindset. That you're basically saying, well, if you're going to be a peasant and watch anime, I'm going to spoil it for you. That's kind of where I'm coming from with it.
So, going off of that, like, so for me, I don't watch anime at all. If I do, I'm watching an anime that's like years and years old, so it's gonna be spoiled regardless at this point. But
Yeah.
For me, I've seen a lot of manga people spoiling manga for other readers. So like I will read even if I read like scans, but especially if I read the like English releases, there'll be people that read the scans or raws who will be posting spoilers of what happens in the manga. And I'm like, great. So now I know exactly what happens, and they're not spoiler tagging it or whatever. And like, sure, maybe you're reading the scans, but perhaps I'm only reading the physicals. So stuff like I know a big one I saw like recently that just made me have to read the scans, and I ended up not caring for the manga too much. And I've kind of lost my interest in it. But Rent a Girlfriend was a big one where it's super popular, and the English releases are only up to volume 4, while the Japanese are like I think volume 18 or something like that. So the scans are way ahead. And so people that read the scans or read the raws are spoiling it for people that are reading, the physicals. And it's like these huge aspects of the story. It's like, thanks, guys. So I'm not going to read it anymore. And what you're doing is essentially killing the community. So you're essentially making it so you don't get any more material for that. I feel like because you're slowly dwindling the community because you're pushing people out of it. They're like, well, there's no point in me, going any further with this. And maybe people like that aspect. Maybe they want to only be the only person enjoying their thing, and they don't care if their shows get canceled or whatever. But I just think it's a ridiculous thing to do. Now, I know some people just don't know any better. Perhaps they don't know how to spoiler tag, or they just didn't know that was a spoiler. They didn't understand, not everybody's up to that point. And I understand that. Like,
we've all been there.
It's still not great, but it's understandable more so.
I think, well, yeah, accidental spoilers do happen. Like that's a whole separate thing. But I think, a lot of people, or not a lot of people, but it seems like there is a fair amount of like, scan readers or manga readers or whoever maliciously like going out of their way to like spoil things. And that's kind of more so what I was talking about, is just like, because, an accidental spoiler who, at the end of the day, it's like, if I know somebody didn't mean to do it, I'm forgiving of that. That's okay. But if it's intentional, that's such a horrible thing to do to somebody else in the community, especially if it's like a show or a manga that means a lot to them, and then you just ruined the story.
And I
know, like, for sure, I try to be conscious of like if I'm talking about anything super specific, like this is an anime or manga, but Emily and I were talking about an Otome game that she got me into, that something big happened, and we were talking about it on our Discord, and there's two of our other friends there, who were also kind of interested, but I didn't know if they were going to play or not. So I was like, I don't want to spoil this for them. So like, let me put the
Yeah.
spoiler blockers on. It's just like the respect and like the awareness of like maybe this is a minor point, but it still might be a big point to someone else.
Yeah, and
Exactly.
I think I think also everybody's guilty of a little bit of spoiler here and there. Um,
Hmm.
I've been trying. I have to hold myself back currently with the one series that I'm reading that Emily is also reading, which is the My Life as a Villainess. And I'm like, you need to catch up. Why are the English releases
Yeah.
going fast enough? Like,
Y'all
Right.
both have to be quiet. I'm only on book 3.
yeah. So it drives me nuts. But I think this is also not like a specific thing to just manga and anime. Every aspect of like nerdy culture. So if you like Star Wars, if you like Game of Thrones, um, you like
Or
Marvel
watch something soon
movies
as it
and
comes
stuff like
out,
that.
you're screwed.
If you don't watch it as that's being released, you can essentially get it spoiled to you. Now there are a lot of camaraderie where like people will not spoil anything for like a good month. Like nobody will talk about it. Like it's just a sworn thing that just everybody's like, be quiet. We'll have our chance. Just let everybody watch it first. But
You think
it's
ahead on Twitter.
few and far between.
If you think ahead on Twitter and like put the time into it, you can block certain tags, but you just have to hope that if someone's posting a spoiler, they put that hashtag in and you won't see it.
Well, like so,
So there's like a small risk of that, but it's more of like a preventative measure, which is kind of nice.
well, there's also things like so I'm big in the Star Wars community. Um, and so when I was watching the Mandalorian show, um, of course YouTube picked up on that and it started recommending me videos for it, and I had to watch the episodes like a day or two after. Um, and basically what ends up happening is people would be posting YouTube videos immediately, and one guy, he does like Star Wars theory videos and stuff like that. He actually put in his thumbnail a big spoiler and his title. And I was like, great, thanks. And it was like the final episode, and I was like, great, thanks. The big plot twist that everybody was like freaking out about that I didn't know about yet. I knew there was something big, but I didn't know about the aspect. And like right before I watch it, that video gets recommended to me in YouTube, and I'm like, great, thanks. Now it's spoiled. Why did you have to put it in your
That's so
thumbnail
shitty.
and stuff? I was like, why would you do that? What possesses you to be that rude to people? Like, I get you want to get your video out and stuff like that, but be respectful. But anyways, to move on from this and to get more into so gatekeeping and like specifically like people thinking that their manga is the only manga and their genre is the only genre. You see that I think you see it a lot with like the more shonen and seinen series fans. I think they have more of a interest in only watching their type of series, and that if anybody else dares enjoy another genre besides theirs, it's kind of seen as like, ugh, you watch something that's for degenerates, or you watch something that's not as good as my stuff, or you read something that's not as good as my stuff. And not saying that's everybody. I've met plenty of shonen and seinen fans, and I love a good portion of seinen manga myself, that are perfectly fine. But I feel like there is a bit of toxic masculinity in those genres specifically,
Right.
that I see.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Like, I think so, as we discussed kind of a little bit in the first episode of the podcast, one thing the community definitely suffers from is, a little bit of sexism. And I think probably many women can relate to this, and even men as well, in the community, because it's a fairly common occurrence, unfortunately. But what I kind of wanted to discuss was one of the ways in which like this sexism manifests itself, and that is kind of through like what Dom was just saying is like this shonen elitism, and essentially like what I mean by that is elitism that like kind of involves the male demographic looking down upon genres that are geared toward women, like romances, for example. And I actually have a good example of this that is relevant right now. By the time the episode comes out, it may be a little bit less, but I still think it's important to discuss. Yeah. So in mid-January of this year, there was a post made on Twitter, and I won't say the person's name just for their privacy in case they don't want it out there, but it basically said, "This is why I don't watch manga tubers." And then attached to this video was a clip that features one of the male content creators in the community. And in this clip, the YouTuber was showing off Requiem of the Rose King. And while doing that, and this is a direct quote that I read to you, he said, "Like you might think, oh, this is some pussy shit, because, like, it's shoujo. But this shit is fire." So one thing I noticed after watching this video and hearing him say that,
such like a backhanded compliment that he's like, "Oh, this is good, but all of this genre is terrible."
Right. So a lot of the comments I saw on Twitter, like in response to this, were quite rude, honestly, toward the person that posted the clip. And the comments were from people that are friends with this YouTuber, and are also kind of part of that demographic
community.
Yeah, and so they were basically really staunchly defending him and denying that anything he said was wrong. So my major problem that I have with this is just the sheer ignorance about what was wrong with the statement that was made. And genuinely, it seemed like people had no clue what was wrong with it. So my purpose in bringing this up, I'll let you guys obviously give your opinions, was just to kind of enlighten everybody, and kind of tell you my perspective about the statement, because I found it very upsetting, and I found the responses very upsetting as well. So for those of you that aren't aware, like the term pussy in and of itself is a very derogatory statement toward mainly men, actually, that exhibit like traditionally feminine tastes or characteristics. And one of the definitions of pussy is just a slang term that is used to define a weak or cowardly man or person. And so if you don't already understand what the problem with using that terminology was, is that he is referring to an entire demographic as pussies simply for liking manga that has a female audience in mind. So the statement not only infers that things for women are less than, but it also is kind of saying that anything for men or a male audience is automatically superior.
Yeah. So I think for me, as being a male that enjoys the shoujo and josei genres that are, relatively geared towards women, that's just how they are. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. There's no getting around that. First off, the sexism in the community about that, like, you can like whatever you want, that's fine, but if you put down another demographic just because they don't like what you like is just showing your ignorance. And I think saying those kinds of alpha male type comments are really detrimental to the community as a whole, because it keeps people away from discovering very good, interesting series. And it's funny enough because there's a lot of overlap between the demographics. So like there's a lot of things that I would consider shojo. So like After the Rain, I consider shojo. You know what After a Rain is? It's seinen, which these seinen elitists think of as this shojo pussy shit. And in fact, it's a seinen series. Its demographic is geared towards you. So it's like also an ignorance of what the genres have in them. And not only that, but the genres, I think, are starting to get more diverse. And I would be interested to see in, say, shonen, I would interested to see a protagonist that's more LGBTQ or something like that. Rather than someone that's just like the male lead who's weak and he's getting stronger and he has a female love interest and all that. Be interested to see a different dynamic of it. I don't want it to be forced into the story, but I want to see more of a variation, because I think, for me personally, reading shonen manga, it's kind of like I've read one, I've read them all. And that's not completely true, but at a base standpoint, shonen as well as shoujo, both have their kind of their base demographic. They know who they're gearing it towards. They know what those people like, and they just pump it out like it's nothing. And I think the biggest thing is finding good quality content in those genres that are unique. And I think a big one for me is when I found My Love Story, which is a shoujo geared towards guys. I was blown away by the fact that it was so different, and I was so interested in this kind of like romantic comedy that was like goes above and beyond story wise, and just has like the perfect amount of realism combined with the outrageous.
Right. So what about like just based off of the statement or whatever you want to address, but like I'm also interested to see what Danielle has to say about this particular topic, as she's also a girl, and I felt a little outraged when I heard this statement.
So tonight was the first time I actually listened to it because you had to send it to me because I didn't know anything about it. Because like I'm on Twitter most of the time, but I actually don't follow a lot of like manga tubing or like manga posters on Twitter. It's just like not my thing, like my outlet to get info or talk about it. So I was kind of in the dark until tonight, and when I saw that, I was just like angered, but I'm also like just so disappointed, It's because this is like a one of like
well,
like communities that I love, that
Right.
when I see things like that and like hear people say terms like that to I'm sure he'd probably say it was not like to put anybody down. That's just how I talk, because there are people that are like that. Like, no, if you're gonna say this is some pussy shit, that it's obviously listed as a shoujo. I have it all. It would be the most like close to shonen shoujo, because I've read it and I know why he would probably get into it. But to say that like just because it's listed as shoujo and it's like released by them, it's so disgusting to just know that there are people out there that will just judge something based off of the title that they see it is, and like not like go further and read into it or dabble in it and like find out like more about the genre, or more like take people's like feelings into consideration.
Yeah, and actually that was another thing that really surprised me about it was just the response to it seemed to be very like, oh, this is not a problem at all. And in my mind, I was thinking, in what world is this not problematic? In what world is this not sexist? And I realized that, like, many people may be uneducated in the subject, but I want this to like clarify why
It's the
there's a
time when you
problem.
have a discourse and talk about it
Yeah,
and bring it
exactly.
up instead of just saying like, "Oh, you're dumb. How could you bring like
Mm.
he didn't say anything wrong," or like, you're just getting worked up over nothing.
Well, I
Like,
think
no,
Yeah,
that's
well,
not talking about
exactly.
through the issue.
so. I think it brings up a couple of issues. The first is obviously, like you guys said, not being educated enough in what you're reading, and just judging things on a like base blanket statement. Just because something, just because shojo and shonen are made for these genres doesn't mean that they don't have anything interesting for other demographics. It's just what they mainly are trying to go towards, and that goes with any kind of media or stuff that we consume. There's always going to be a main demographic. Coming from a graphic design standpoint, we look at marketing and we look at when we make any kind of post, it's like, well, who are you gearing this work towards? Who are you trying to entice? And you have to kind of pick out your main demographic. That doesn't mean you can't get people from other demographics, but you're trying to mainly get it from a certain demographic. So having a more education on what that is and understanding on that is a big thing. Another thing is like it shows that you think you're better than everybody else because of what you enjoy, and that you think you are some sort of god on these topics, when you aren't. You're not important. Nobody knows who you are. We didn't even mention the person's name. I mean, you are
Okay.
you're nothing. And at the end of the day, I mean, it's your opinion. You're certainly entitled to it. That doesn't mean your opinion's right. And I think that's a big issue.
I wouldn't go so far to say that on my end. I would clarify
well, that's fine.
That's
but
Dom's point of view.
That's fine. But I think it's definitely an alpha male, mentality. And I think if you don't address that issue, that it just perpetuates it for a male standpoint. Right. And being a male in that kind of world, that's a big issue that I like to address. That I want to make sure that more guys are comfortable with themselves, that they don't feel that they all they have to do is this all manly stuff. That's you can't do this, you can't do that, and it's such a like 1950s mentality. It's like it's 2020
right.
or 2021.
I will say that yeah, I do agree with you in that respect. I think that it's just really at the end of the day, it comes down to the fact that it's just ignorant and elitist and sexist and a disgusting kind of mentality to have. And I think that I in my experience, I've heard so many people in this community talk crap about shoujo or josei or any kind of thing geared toward women, time and time again. Like, it's constant. And I just think that it's something that's kind of it needs to be talked about, because nobody, like, shonen is great, shoujo is great. I'm not here to say that like either one is better than the other, but I just think that when it comes to things geared toward a male demographic, it's viewed as like superior, when that's not the case. You're not the elite of society, and you don't have better taste simply because you're reading something or watching something geared toward men. And I think that it's something that we shouldn't perpetuate, especially because there are so many young people joining the community. And I'm fearful that when, we have people who are modeling that behavior for young men, that you are encouraging them to have similar mentalities to yourself. And I think that that's incredibly negative and hurtful. And obviously it is, because the girl in her tweet had said that this is why I do not watch videos from manga tubers. So obviously she has like a very negative perception of the kind of community that is.
So my biggest takeaway from this whole issue is that whether you're a woman who likes shonen and seinen, or whether you're a man that likes shoujo or josei, just be comfortable with what you like. Realize that these people's opinions, on things that you enjoy don't matter at the end of the day, and that you should not gear yourself towards what someone else says that you should like. So if I like shoujo and I'm like, oh, you should go read all these shoujos, take that with a grain of salt. If you like shoujo, if you're interested in the genre, go for it. If that's not your thing, that's okay. Go read something else. There's something out there for everyone in this community now. And I think that's such an amazing thing that we have so much manga widely available, that it has become more open, where you can find something so specific on your niche.
Right. Yeah, so I mean, to finish off the conversation, the final thing that I kind of wanted to talk about, because obviously we are not perfect, I am not perfect, and I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit about gatekeeping in the community, and how like I'm guilty of this as well, because I think another prominent problem that I have noticed in the community is this new versus old weeb thing, where there are lots of new people, obviously, that have joined the community ever since quarantine began, and that I think that has caused a lot of divide that I have personally noticed, and even within like my own self and my own feelings. Like, I am definitely guilty of gatekeeping as well. And I'll let you guys talk about your thoughts as well on that. But
we were talking about it before, and I love the term that you gave us as like seasoned weebs. My new favorite term. But I also suffer. I know I definitely don't always do it, but I'm aware when I try to gatekeep, whether it just be in my head making a comment to what someone has posted, or like a video I've watched, and I'm like, oh, well, you only just started, and how do you know anything? And I'm like,
yeah,
okay, but you need to calm down, because you were literally in their shoes back in like 2006, and I'm sure someone was saying that about me too. And like, it's hard, because we're humans, we feel protective about things we like, and if it's like someone who already doesn't display like the same kind of likes as you, and they're trying to get into something, you're like, oh, what are the reasons you're getting into this? Like, I don't know if I am truly believing that you're like interested in this, or if it's just like clout chasing. And it's like,
yeah,
ugh. And like, I don't want to be that person, so it's like, let me just be conscious and like bite my tongue, and just know like we're all there. Yeah, there's going to be some bad seeds that are just like doing that, but there's going to be plenty more people that are genuinely trying to get into something, or genuinely connect with something, because I can fall in love with something within the span of like 10 minutes and become obsessed with it. And does that make me a true fan? Yes. Does that make the true fan of someone who's liked it for 10 plus years? Yes. We all have our own enjoyment out of things, that who's to say we can't make it our own,
Exactly. And I feel the exact same way as you, in literally almost in every respect, because I have those exact same thoughts. Like, I've obviously been involved in the hobby for a very long time. And so with that, I've grown quite an attachment to the community and the hobby itself. And like, because it's gained so much popularity specifically, I'm realizing that like I am not always the most welcoming person, unfortunately. Like, there are times that I feel frustrated or resentful or impatient. And like, whenever I catch myself feeling those things, I genuinely feel bad about it. But it's also something that I almost can't help sometimes, because I kind of, I think where it comes from is that I take it kind of personally when I see this hobby that I've loved so much for so long. And sometimes it is the case that there are people using it for clout, or they're using it to be quirky, or they're just watching it because it's popular right now, and then they'll ditch the hobby as soon as it's not popular anymore. And so it's like, even though I recognize that those reasons are none of my business, like, if you want to be involved in the community, it has nothing to do with me why you are involved in it. It's still something that I catch myself thinking like, oh, this bothers me. And so it's like, I'm definitely working on that, because I want to be a positive influence and I don't want to ever be rude or unwelcoming. And I'm never rude or unwelcoming outwardly, but it's just something that I feel sometimes, and I wanted to be transparent about it, because I think it's common with people that have been involved in the hobby for a long time, and I don't think people want to talk about it because it makes you seem like a bad person, but it's very human emotion, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
we're not
think
perfect.
I'm definitely also guilty of like a little bit of gatekeeping. You know, being in this community for so long, I've kind of been you know, when I see new people in this community, I felt like, you know, no, this is my like thing, you know, go away, you young people. You know, old man Dom is here. He's the only one that's allowed to be in here.
Get
This
off
is
my
my
lawn.
Yeah, this is my lawn. Get out. But I think uh someone who really helped me like change that mentality was a friend of mine, Manny, who he's a more seasoned weeb than I am technically, because he was in this community long before I was, but because he's dropped out of it for so long, he's kind of coming into this with like this almost like it feels like a newborn interest in it, and he's just in it for fun. He just loves being in it, and he just loves socializing with it. And I think seeing him just genuinely enjoy himself, to the point I was hanging out with him and he was like, you know, thanks for bringing me onto the Otakus After Dark server, because the people there are so nice, and it's so like they just genuinely enjoy stuff, and there's no drama in anything.
Manny.
And I was like, hey, you know, thanks for coming by. I mean, thanks for, you know, talking and all that. And it's just it's changed my viewpoint on this, and it's like, you know, I've found more enjoyment in this hobby thanks to his outlook. Just going to show you, like, even if someone's new to this hobby, they can change you and your views on how you feel about it, and for the better.
And I think that's like a lovely, it's so beautiful. I think that's a lovely final note, is that you know, as a conclusion to this conversation, I think it's really important for just everybody to be mindful of the way that they exhibit elitist tendencies and the ways in which it can harm the community. I think it's so important for us to be open and happy, like Manny is, and just embrace it and just enjoy it, and enjoy the other people that are part of the community. Because at the end of the day, we're all weebs. We all like the same thing, and it's something to bond over. And I don't think it should divide us in the way that it does sometimes.
Stop trying to put other people down. You know, just enjoy it, and find new things and enjoy yourself. Anyways, guys, you can check us out on Otakus After Dark on our YouTube channel, our Discord, our Instagram, and Twitter. All the links will be down in the description for you. Thank you for joining us for drinks today, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Bye.
Bye.